The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Viscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelley Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
Welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm Debbie and want to thank you for joining us today, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and help people be well. We're streaming live at the 21 Podcast today, and today we welcome Barbara Wallace. After 14 years of starts and stops, Barb finally did sell to the Big Five publisher in 2009. Keep in mind, this was before self-publishing was a thing. Today, she's published nearly 24 romance and mystery novels and is 100,000 books shy of 1 million books sold worldwide. Wow. We're going to come back to that. In many ways, she considers herself a newbie writer with much to learn. Obviously, we're friends, because there's always something to learn. Her latest release was December's Their Christmas Miracle, which critics called an emotionally satisfying contemporary romance that should be read with a box of tissues nearby. Her next release, Backyards Have Bodies, the second in the Sadie McIntyre mystery series, should be released in late spring. Welcome, Barbara Wallace.
Hi, thank you.
Obviously, I've known you a long time, and we're going to come back to that, but...
Yeah, actually, when I got the call, we were at Critique Group.
We were at Critique Group when
it was right before. Yeah,
really?
Because she called, and then I had to get in the car and go to Critique Group, and came running in yelling, "I got the call!"
Yes. Well, just for our listeners, Barb and I have been in a writing group for I don't even know how many years.
Well, 10 or 11, yeah.
Probably more than that, with two other women, Denise and Nina. And the thing that I'm kind of most proud about our group, which I don't know, maybe our listeners know someone, but I don't know any group. There are published groups, critique groups that work together, and then there are unpublished critique groups that work together, and there are groups that some of the people get published. But in our group, all four of us started unpublished and got published.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of proud of that, because I've never heard of another group. And you and I certainly have enough writer friends, and maybe there is another one out there, but
there probably are, but I mean,
no, I don't
know if they start. Okay. You're right.
I'm giving us the Writer's Block Award for the only critique group.
Well, actually, if you count your former members published too.
Who's my former member?
Katie Cooper.
Oh, yes. And there were others, but I don't remember them. It was really so long ago, and some of them I didn't know that well. But the four of us have been together a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So you got that call.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, let's go back to the 100,000 books shy of 1 million books sold. Barb, that's amazing. I didn't even know that about you. You're so humble in our group. You should have a crown.
I was explaining that to you email. It is a really cool number.
Yes.
But part of that is because Harlequin's sold throughout the world.
Okay.
So I'm sold in 13 countries.
If you're trying to make that's not a smaller thing. I'm sorry, it's worldwide. Don't just think I am.
Yes, it's worldwide. I'm really big in Jakarta. And
really?
Yeah, actually.
Oh, that's funny. I don't even want to admit. I don't even know where that is.
Indonesia.
Oh, well, I was there this summer. You'd think this past February.
I had a book on the shelves then too.
Oh, if only I could have found. Believe me, where we were, there weren't books on shelves. There were bananas and monkeys in the streets.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. But imagine if I could have found a monkey and put your book in his hand on the street.
I would have paid you.
Oh, Jonathan's giving me the look a little too close. Okay. So almost when you make 1 million, I'm going to get a crown made for you.
That's going to take a while. I mean,
No, crowns, you can order them. It's like 2 weeks turnaround. They come right in.
I have a crown.
Oh, perfect.
Our group has a crown, and we've all taken turns wearing it when we sold.
I don't think I got the crown when I sold.
I do. Know. I think it might be at Nina's house.
Well, Nina was third. I was definitely fourth. And when we were driving here today, I was thinking, should I tell Barb that because I think Denise sold first.
Yeah.
Denise sold first, you sold second, and then Nina sold, and I was the only one who wasn't published. And I thought, well, I'm going to be last, but I'm going to sell the most books. Well, clearly, that dream is dead.
Not necessarily.
No, you're right. I might sell 1 million today and beat you. Who knows?
Exactly.
This podcast.
There are self-publishers who sold 1 million books in 2 years. I mean, that's a 10-year figure in 24 books. I mean, there are people with one book out who've sold 1 million copies.
Not many, though.
You'd be surprised in the self-publishing world. I mean, I've gone to conferences where these people have been out for maybe 4 or 5 years and are well over 1 million copies.
But there aren't many of them.
No. But
Okay,
there aren't
good.
many, period. I mean, there's a lot of Harlequin authors that are in that number.
Right. Well,
I'm actually on the low end for some of the Harlequin authors.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, all right. Well, as awesome as you are now, clearly I need to dig your brain for some information. So
Okay.
we're here to talk about conflict. Now, obviously, I came up with the title, Avoid It in Life, and put it in your books. Avoid It in Life probably is not really healthy advice, but it is my personal motto.
Mine too.
Yeah, Barb and I have never had a fight in 20 years. Maybe we'll do it today on the show just for fun. So what conflict? How important is that in a book?
It's the important thing.
The important thing.
Yeah. I mean, conflict is what creates the tension in the book. I'm not used to the microphone, so it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's what creates your tension. Conflict is the thing that's keeping the protagonist or the antagonist, mostly the protagonist really, the protagonist from reaching their goal. So it can be their environment. It could be it could be something external, like the environment, like opposing forces, like in an action movie. The external conflict would be the bad guys, the upper echelon trying to prevent them from making their mission because they're keeping a secret, something like that. But it can also be internal, and it can be their own doubts about themselves, their fears. It could be their religion. It could be, you look at it as man against God, man versus nature.
Okay.
Like a good one is The Revenant.
The movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
The conflict there is man versus nature. Is he going to survive?
After being...
You're right, where he gets attacked by the bear and all that other stuff. Is he going to survive that horrible winter and all the obstacles against him?
Because if he was sitting by a pool, that wouldn't have been such a good book.
Or, yeah.
Well, if he was shirtless,
That's true.
I think we'd all be happy.
He got stranded in the winter and he's like, oh, I built a fire. Okay, now things are good. Oh, look, I found food. That'd be a really boring book.
Right.
So there's always got to be tension.
So in romance, where is the tension?
In romance, it's usually dual pronged because you have external conflict, which is, they both usually have conflicting goals.
Okay.
But the bigger conflict is the internal, which is what is the reason keeping them from falling in love with that particular person. And it's usually some psychological fear, or it's an inadequacy that they feel, or it goes against, again, everything they've believed. Like always the famous example is if he's a firefighter, she should be an arsonist.
Ooh. Now see that now there's a romance ad that I kind of like to read
because
that.
there's a built-in conflict because they both believe in different things.
Right.
But you could have them believe the same things. You could have them be very similar. Like they're both firefighters and they both feel inadequate and they both feel like they don't deserve happiness. Well, their conflict is them getting over the fact that they don't feel deserving.
And if you have
go ahead.
If you have external and internal, do you need to resolve both in the book?
You should.
Because otherwise they can't get together.
Right.
Well, how do you sell the second book? If you just leave a little bit of conflict on the table, you got another book you can write.
Well, yeah.
That's a series.
That's a series. And you might have the external conflict might go over, but if you want a happy ending, you kind of have to solve the internal conflict.
And in romance, you have to have a happy ending.
In romance, you have to. Otherwise, it's not a romance. It's by definition, there must be either happy ever after or happy for now.
Fair enough.
Happy for now.
Well, because in today's world, it's obvious that sometimes relationships don't work out.
There's going to be a new dude in the next book, so
we try to believe that they're going to make it. And I've read books where you wonder at the end, like, well, did you really resolve the inner conflict? She still seems just as screwed up. They need to be able to come to Jesus moment about themselves,
right,
and what they want, and then they're able to fall in love and have their happy ending. So the conflict is what's keeping them from making that final jump.
So when you write one of these 900,000 books that have sold, do you plan the conflict ahead of time?
Oh yeah, you have to.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, and clearly I know you, and you are probably the number one plotter that I know. I mean, I've seen you with your charts and your papers. And
I do. I'm the one who's got the notebook. My biggest thing is finding out what each character's greatest fear is. And that's usually what drives them to make their decisions.
And would you say that you decide those, or do you get to know the character and you kind of figure them out?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
The way my process usually works is I think I've come up with what the fear is, and I think I know what the conflict is, and then I write the first 5 chapters and realize that now I know the conflict and the fear. So I finish the book, and then I go back and have to rewrite the first 5 chapters.
And how long does it generally take you to write a book?
Depends on when the deadline is.
That's what Shirley said. She said, when you start getting paid for these things, you suddenly start writing more prolifically.
It's amazing. I have a book due March 7th, and I've got 10,000 words written. So
out of what, 50?
Out of 50. So yeah, it'll take me 3 weeks. Yeah. Normally it takes me, if I had my choice, it would take me 6 months.
I know that we're on air, and so they can't see that blank. Look, you have.
They can hear it. Don't worry.
Can you hear it?
That's called dead air.
They can hear that dead air.
It's a pregnant pause.
You have 6 weeks left to write 40,000 words.
No, I have 3 weeks left.
Oh, right. You have 3 weeks to write 40,000 words.
Right.
And you'll do it.
I have to. It's called writing day and night, but that's what you do.
Really?
But that's what a lot of writers do. I don't have the neatest process. Nina, the other member of our critique group,
right.
she writes for Harlequin too, so it's in the same boat,
I think of Nina a little bit more. She's a little messier, like I am.
Although we're both probably just as messy.
Really?
I just seem like I'm more organized because
right.
I have an idea, and she's much more of a fly-by-night.
Right. Now, with the 3 of us here on the show are theoretically writing memoir type books, or maybe with a splash of self-help. How would you say that conflict should play into those?
It does, because you think about it, the conflict is whatever's keeping the person from their goal. So even in your memoir, you didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to be a ballroom dancer. I'm going to be a champion ballroom dancer.
I didn't.
Now I'm going to write a novelist. I mean,
let me get notes here.
There were obstacles along the way to you discovering who you were and what it is you wanted out of life.
Yeah.
And those obstacles were your conflict. I mean, nothing worth having comes without fighting, right?
Right.
The struggle is the conflict. So, I mean, I know your book is a lot about a woman finding her truth in midlife.
Right.
So we didn't just wake up and say, this is my truth.
What do I do if I don't think I know my truth yet? Do I just stop writing the book? Do I put it aside? Do I wait till I'm 60?
No, I don't think so.
What do I do?
I think you'll probably find your truth as you're writing it. And
that's
the conflict. The conflict is, I don't know my truth. I'm still struggling for my truth. I've found this place, but I'm not sure that's my truth. I mean, that's the conflict, and that's what keeps people turning pages. They want to know how you're going to resolve the problem.
Believe me, that's what keeps me writing it too, because I've written it twice now. It's been completely edited from beginning to end twice, and at the end, I'm not that happy. I'm not that satisfied with it, because I don't feel like I've kind of come to the answer, to the Jesus.
Yeah, so you're probably still working through the conflict, and maybe that's the heart of the book that you're missing now. Is what is this thing that's keeping me? What is it that I'm struggling with that I have to get over?
Right. Okay. So I guess. So do you?
And she writes notes on her book. Yeah.
Do you add psychotherapist to your resume? Because I'd like to call and make an appointment.
I can give you the name of mine. I spend a lot of time in therapy. Good. That's on the podcast now.
That's right. We're all friends.
But
there.
as far as memoirs, it's the struggle. People don't care to read about happy people. I mean, truthfully. Would you like to read I shouldn't say that. They want them to be happy eventually.
Yeah.
But do you want to read a book where the person's happy and everything just drops at their feet awesomely?
No, you're right. And I've even said...
We want to identify, and we pick the people whose struggles identify with us. So, a 50-year-old woman or struggling to find what it is her life means... There's a lot of 50-year-old women in the same boat, and they want to read about, well, how did she do it? What is she thinking? What came up? What obstacles did she come up with? That's the conflict, and that's what the memoir is ultimately your battle against those struggles. Man against self.
Wow, that's interesting. I wonder what I mean. I wish
unless you had a kind of life like Nelson Mandela, where then obviously you have an external struggle.
Right.
But for most of us, it's an internal struggle and struggling against ourselves and our nature and our core beliefs. And a lot of conflict comes from having a poor core belief.
Really?
I think so. I think a lot of us have this identity, and I think it's in books too.
I want to say that again. Conflict comes from
a misidentified core or a incorrect core belief.
Really?
We have this belief inside us that we think I'm supposed to be a success because of X. And so then we spend our life, in fiction, I'll go back to fiction because it sounds more or less. Your character starts out with, I believe that in order to be successful, I need to have X. Because that's how I was raised and that's what I was meant to do. And everything that I do is motivated by this desire to achieve based on that belief. I need to be the president of the company because that's my motivation, and I need is to be a success because I was raised to believe that that's the measure of success. But now I've met this person that makes me rethink everything I believe.
Interesting. I wonder.
And I'm falling in love with this person. So, maybe it's not a love story. Maybe he just meets someone that makes him think differently.
Or maybe he just loves himself.
Oh, Lord, Jonathan should have his own little angelic music for when he is over there in his little booth loving himself.
But that could be the end message. Yeah. Maybe the conflict is he doesn't love himself for who he is. And so he's chasing this perfect person because he believes that person is who he's supposed to be. And the conflict is he can never quite achieve it.
Well, that person obviously has more shoes, and this is...
I need
to go shopping.
He's been obsessed lately with shoes. He has more red shoes than I do.
There can never be enough shoes.
There's never enough shoes.
Don't encourage him.
I'm just saying that.
It's
a rule.
I have literally had to buy a bigger shoe rack. It's like 4 feet wide. I'm not kidding. Inside our door, because he and my daughter they just kick all their shoes off. Well, you start tripping over the things. The dog is falling down. I just wish the dog would pee in their shoes one time. But I've had to buy a bigger rack, and
She's
now
going to train the dog.
Well, that's unlikely.
She struggles with that one.
Here, Mickey, pee in the shoe.
Oh, that would be so good. So I can't get a bigger rack for the space for inside our door. Anyway, back to conflict. See, Jonathan and I have a conflict.
There's an external conflict.
There's no conflict.
He's going to buy as many shoes as he wants, and I will make a bigger shoe rack.
But an external, okay, so you go. An external conflict would be, but I'm not giving you a bigger shoe rack, and he keeps buying shoes. That's an external one. It's one that's easily solved, clearly. You either throw the shoes out or you build a bigger
I'll just buy a bigger shoe rack.
Right.
It's fine.
Okay, that's on air now. Okay, so back to, did you have something?
What in your writing group, what is Deb's role what do you hope to achieve or accomplish by giving Deb your pages for her to read, and then vice versa?
To get an outside opinion on whether you're making sense. When you're sitting there and you write your book, the only voice you have is yours, or in all the self-doubts and whatever. You want someone to read it and tell you either that it makes sense or that they don't understand it. I mean, they're the first person before a reader, so they're kind of playing the role of the reader.
Really, anybody could do that. What does Deb bring to the table is my question. I'm not attacking you. I'm just asking.
I'm kind of curious.
And then you can say what Barb brings to the table.
Deb brings to the table, okay, Deb is a very lyrical writer. She's very good at saying, this doesn't make sense. This metaphor isn't making sense. I see her doing this. She's very good at female characters and knowing what their motivation is and saying, well, why would a female do this? So, and since I write very female-centric books, she brings a lot of that to the table.
Well, that was nice. And she used my favorite word, lyrical, and she doesn't even know it. Talk about that felt like a good pat on the back. I think our group is just so, we don't meet as often as we used to.
Nope.
Because we are all busy, and to a certain extent, because in a way we're a little bit, for lack of a better word, we're also getting pretty successful at what we're doing.
Well, we do it more for plotting and making sense of a bigger story. We don't really need someone to look at your single pages necessarily, because everyone can write really good separate pages. We need someone to pay attention to point A to point Z and say, okay, why are they doing this on page 53? That makes no sense.
That's I never really put that together, but you're right. We used to meet, and it used to be I would give you 10 pages at a time, and you would give me 10 pages at a time, and we would literally write on the paper, and then we would learn from each other. And you're right, we don't need to do that anymore.
No,
so
now we say things like, why is she meeting with the mother this soon? I think you should push this back. And it's much more about structure.
And last time we met, Nina had a book. She had a concept, but she sort of just had 2 characters, and we all, gave our ideas.
Yeah.
And then she picked and was able to pick and choose. Right. So our group has a different function for us now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that is with Nina and I have very tight deadlines. So a lot of times when we were sending pages, we'd say, okay, here's the opening chapter. And then we'd meet again in 2 weeks. And we're like, oh, yeah, we're kind of done.
They're done.
Or we were rushing to get done, so we didn't want to critique because we're rushing to get it to an editor who's going to read it. So before we were sold, it was much different.
Right. Do you think, was it more fun before?
I think in some ways, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you were writing for yourself and you thought everything was awesome. Like everything you wrote was awesome.
Really? Oh, that's funny. So that is really interesting. So you're saying that before we were published, we thought we were awesome?
I don't know about you. I know I'm much harder on my work now than I was 10 years ago.
Is it because you know more or because why do you think you're harder now?
I think because I have
900,000 people are reading them?
No.
I'm just going to keep putting that in there for you.
No, I think it's because I have a higher standard for myself. Plus, I've heard what reviewers have said, what readers have said. You get all that baggage now comes with it.
Right. Well, I think that's really important for our listeners to know because it's easy to get stuck. I mean, back in the day, when the 4 of us were unpublished, there was that question, and we all got published traditionally. We've all also chosen to self-publish some, but we did all make the cut before self-publishing was an option. And I lost my point. So I think for the listeners to realize that time of that hunger and that wanting and that desire and that willingness to do it, even though for all you knew you were never going to get published, that is a fun time.
It is.
And that things change. When you do get published, a lot more comes into it. A lot more of your time is spent on the marketing and the promotion and the thinking of ideas and like today, you drove over an hour to get here. You're going to drive over an hour back. That's that is writing time for you.
Yeah. Well, and I like doing this stuff because I got to see you.
I know.
But you're right, because when you're first starting out, you don't appreciate the fact that you're writing for joy.
Right.
And once you're published, I still love writing. And I love writing my books, but I don't get to spend the time with them the way you might. And you want to go back to that project that's pure joy that you can just do. And one of our friends did. She went back she after publishing a bunch of historical books, went back and said, I want to write this book that just kind of came to me. And she switched genres and went.
You mean Denise?
Denise.
Right.
And I think that we all have kind of gotten to that point where we want to write something that we just truly love for the sake of loving it, and it doesn't have the pressure of, is it going to make money? Is it going to earn out the advance? Is it going to, what do I do to market it? Like, am I going to, I have to tweet so many times. I have to Facebook so many times. And it's.
Right. Well, boy, Barb, this was fascinating.
I think it was all over the place, but thank you.
No, I don't think so at all. And I think we're going to have you back. We want to send our love to Shelley and Mandra, who couldn't be here today. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. If you want to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, send them to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. You can find this podcast and the vodcast video on demand in case you want to watch it. Find this episode and all previous episodes on UnitedPodcast.tv, and please subscribe. May you be well, empowered, and inspired.